Welcome to Season 2 of Path of the Brush, powered by Ultra Pro. Let's sling some paint. All right. Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're in Season 2. This is Episode 1. I'm your host, Rick, here at Path of the Brush on Gen Con TV. We'd just like to give a quick shout out to Gen Con TV and everybody over there for letting us come back for Season 2. Oh, of course, and Ultra Pro for coming on board to be a partner in paint with us, as well as the Army Painter. But what's more importantly is who's our first guest? Who are we going to be talking to? We're going to be talking to Tyler from Dwarven Forge about all things going on over there at the Forge, which is super exciting. Hey, Tyler, welcome.
Hello. Hello.
Hey, it's good to have you, man.
Yeah, it's good to be here in my own home without having to go anywhere else. I really appreciate that part.
Oh, of course. I mean, we want to make it as convenient as we can for all participants. So tell us a little bit about how you got associated with Dwarven Forge.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of a oh god, I almost said Cinderella story, and that's not it at all.
Well, we like
But, it's mainly I started working here about 4 years ago, I think, at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 2019. So we have a whole collection of about 1,700 different pieces, right? Like we've got years worth of content. So when I started, I was just a film PA. They needed an extra hand while we were doing the Hellscape. I think it was the Hellscape project, like last couple videos. All the pieces were scattered everywhere. And so they were like, how, God, it's so hard to get everything. And I was looking at it and I was like, well, I had just lost my job at the comic book store. So I was catering and I was doing some other things. I was like, well, I was vibing really well with Nate, our chief creative. He and I think, have a sort of little bit of an inside lingo. But I was picking up the pieces really quickly is what he was saying. He goes, could you help us like package all this stuff and like get it into archives and like put it in boxes, put these like pieces, because it would make our lives so much easier to do that. Cut to like 3 months later, I basically get done with that project. I did like a Dewey Decimal system of like, okay, you have the pieces, you have the sections, you have the biomes, you have the blah, 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 blah. And then it was, hey, we need customer service help. We don't have enough for customer service. And I was like, I still need a job. I would more than happily handle this for you. So nice. I did that for another, it was about a year. And then once we actually started really working on the Wildlands project, I started doing more for the dev team, started helping out more, started taking care of sort of like the language or like how we were talking to our factories. And that stuff kind of, step by step got to where I was like, I am now, pretty much head of our department. I am helping our sculptors, our painters, and basically making sure that we get prototypes, making sure that our factory has all of the spec sheets correct, making sure that we're actually actively making projects that further the company. And that's kind of actually what is currently going on with our Reforged project. That's a sort of like a mindscape of myself and my coworker Chris, who's head of marketing and community, and it was sort of us trying to say like, how do we continue our business into the future? We do a lot of these big Kickstarters, so that kind of stuff. Like I consistently I am the bridge between the creative and the logistics of like business.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So what we do here on Path of Brush for everybody watching is we bring on an industry professional. We're going to do the interview, and we got some really good information about what Tyler's job is over there. We're going to get some history. But what are you painting tonight, Tyler? And also for everybody that's in the chat, hello. And Jeff, I see you asked. So no OTA tonight. OTA comes on after us. I'm pretty sure that
OTA comes on at 7, but currently tonight there is no OTA. Nate is sick. So he is not going to be. We have no OTA tonight as a consequence. We're just yeah.
Oh, so OTA is over there. Okay, all right, perfect. So what are we painting?
Yeah. So recently, when I got back from Gen Con, at Gen Con, I saw Malifaux. I had never seen it before from Weird Games, and so I'm going to be painting the master English Ivan. He's the one that I got. I got the starter
Nice.
box for the Explorer Society, and I got his core box, and I've really been enjoying him so far. And
Nice.
my coworker was kind enough to assemble it for me because I do not have enough time to assemble. So I do have enough time to paint though. So
Very cool. And I'll be painting a Deep Cuts Pathfinder Battles Clockwork Dragon, which is by Whiz Kids, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to open this up, and then whatever you can tell me about the history of Dwarven Forge and what is Dwarven Forge for anybody watching that is not necessarily privy to its existence.
yeah, all right. In the shortest way possible, because I have a tendency to not abbreviate. Dwarven Forge is a company about modular terrain. What we do is we create pieces that can you can get the same amount of pieces in one box and build 4 or 5 6 different dungeons from that one same collection. Our whole goal is to create a bunch of different landscapes for your games, and we're talking, you can be D&D, you could be Pathfinder, you could be any other game, any wargaming, Warhammer. We would love to have our, we have these beautiful sculpted trees and everything that can be really be great as scatter. We have a whole collect, like a wide collection of pieces that can
Okay.
get us there. We've been a
Okay.
company for about 25 years, since 1996. We originally started doing it in resin, and we were at Gen Con selling at a booth. We were in Dragon Magazine, I think, in the back in the catalogs and stuff. That was
Yeah.
being shipped out from a garage, for the longest time. Back in like 2011, we decided that we were going to switch to PVC. Resin factories were closing, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to keep in business. So
Okay.
we completely revitalized ourselves and created a new durable, lightweight, and still highly detailed product. And that's
Right.
kind of our big thing. I think most people who know Dwarven Forge already, it's premier terrain. It's the thing that when you see it on the table, it's highly detailed. And we also are one of the few people, I think, that make terrain that like sell it pre-painted as well, like
Mhm.
fully painted out of the box.
Okay.
I would also say, I guess, at Dwarven Forge, we're here to create. I think I said it before, but just like we're here to create like worldscapes. We want to give you pieces that you've never seen before, but also at
Right.
the same time you have like a basis of you're getting everything you need to like build whatever you want.
Right. I remember the packaging back in the late 90s when I first saw Dwarven Forge was literally like just a cardboard box with a sticker on it. Right.
Yeah, it would be funny if that was still what it looked like.
It is not like
Right?
that
Like
anymore.
if why would a company continue to have just a cardboard box with a sticker on it? That seems asinine. I mean, that's one of the advantages. We do ship it direct to customer too, so we're like, I guess we don't
Right.
have to worry about it being on a shelf. So like
Right.
whatever.
Right. I saw it at a hobby store in North Carolina
Mhm.
when I was in the military station there, and I was like, "Oh, what's this stuff?" And then the the owner was like, "Yep, we just got it in. It's not for sale. We're going to be using it." And they opened it up, and it was
Get away.
yeah, they're like, "Back off of our stuff, man."
Yeah.
And then it became like everybody was fighting over who was going to get to use it, right?
Yeah,
At
that
the
makes
store.
sense.
It was awesome. And it's still, I know I have lots of friends that are like big backers on the Kickstarters that you guys are
Mhm.
now kind of known for in regards to um, the terrain and how it's getting out to the consumer.
Yeah.
And what is the, do you know why they went with that model as far as doing
The original
Kickstarters?
model of just like
Of going from retail to direct to consumer through Kickstarter.
a lovely thing called the internet.
Of
Right?
course.
Like, yeah,
I mean,
the thing
basically,
that
yes.
yeah, the thing that we all have, right?
Right.
Like a lot of businesses then decided to we have our own web store. What do
Mhm.
we need to go to a third party for? I
Hmm.
think also when it comes to our product specifically, it is a little bit of a different nature than like miniatures or dice or books in general. Like
Hmm.
it's harder to some of these things are 50 pounds, 30 pounds. And again,
Right.
if you don't have something, any sort of label on there that
Hmm.
shows them what it could be or like what's inside, a lot of our business is repeat customers. And so that's one of
Right.
the things that we actually heavily utilize Gen Con for, as
Hmm.
well as, PAX, is getting stuff on the table so people can see it, mess with
Yeah.
it, and like visualize it for themselves for the first time.
Right.
And then once that happens, that usually translates to a lot of people coming in and saying, I saw it at this convention. I'm going to
Hmm.
make my first purchase because I finally understood it. Or it made
Right.
it really clear, like how cool it was. And I think that's just harder to do on retail. And on top of that, we were not to say this way, like we're more profitable because we get to ship direct to customer.
Okay. And that all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what's it like working with Stefan in any
Well,
capacity?
to be perfectly honest, I don't directly work with Stefan too often.
Sure.
Stefan lives out in Seattle
Yep.
area.
In his
Uh,
castle.
yeah, and is whatever it is. And he about 6 years ago, I think
Yeah.
it was like 2017 or something like that,
Hmm.
um, or like 2018 around. That's when he left out there because not to say it this way, but he kind of did a lot of the stuff and he wanted to go and try do other things and do his own
Sure.
art and everything. And
Yep.
so that was when Nate took over as chief creative,
Hmm.
and that's also what our CFO has been doing a really good job as well of helping us get into a different sort of,
Hmm.
I guess, mentality and sort of a different kind of business than we had before. Before we
Sure.
were kind of like going Kickstarter to Kickstarter,
Right.
and as each Kickstarter has happened, we've learned more, and we're getting closer and closer to a better product model, I think.
Right.
So I don't, not to veer away from your question, but I don't directly work with Stefan because pretty
Okay.
much none of us do.
Okay.
He's still the owner of the company, but he
Yeah.
is in Seattle. He's doing his own thing,
Yeah.
and pretty much none of our day to day is synonymous with each other.
Okay.
He'll because he was doing Destination Fantastic,
Yep. I
so he
remember.
was doing that stuff. But
Hmm.
we're the ones working. Our dev team is comprised of like 6 different people.
Okay.
Um, I mean, I'm gonna check that number there. 6, and then Nate and myself, so 8.
Mhm. Okay.
So eight altogether. It's the 8 of us kind of coming up with the new concepts, making the actual sculpts,
Right.
doing the actual work on the paint and all these other things. And he'll come around probably about once a year, and like we'll chat and we'll talk about the next steps. We'll
Hmm.
get his eye on some things, and then
Okay.
he's going off doing his own thing.
All right. That's cool. I see him a lot at normal shows. I know
Yeah.
he was under the weather and wasn't able to attend Gen Con for the first time in like
Yes.
20
Yeah.
years or something
It's
like
the
that.
first time he's ever missed Gen Con since he was coming for like even just for like Dwarven Forge. So yeah.
Yeah. And I usually see him at like Gamehole Con and
Mhm.
Gary Con and stuff. The other shows he attends on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna actually have to turn my light here.
but as far as like I was saying is uh, one of the things I find very interesting is you guys have been a kind of a staple in the industry for a while, but it always surprises me. Even one of your, I think it might have been Nate that recently said it too. Is it's funny like when you're standing around your all's booth, and you guys have pretty much been in the same spot forever
Right.
at Gen Con, and you will get people that come up that absolutely know the product, love it, talk just crazy mad about how awesome it is, and then you get the people that come up and have never heard of it
Yeah.
and it's like, "What?" It's really surprising that there's still those individuals that are, like, brand new and potential customers out there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all walks of life, man. Like
Mhm,
it's a thing where one of the things we were kind of taken away, and I genuinely really appreciate about what I was seeing at this year's Gen Con,
mhm.
just a younger audience.
Yes.
We have a heavily younger audience at this year's Gen Con than ever before, and that was really neat. I thought that was, I think that also like really helps kind of solidify where the hobby is heading,
Sure.
and where or I guess even just like where the hobby has gotten to.
Sure.
And I think that also speaks a lot to like how many people still maybe didn't know us before. Because some
Hmm.
people who were adults or whatever, they're like, yeah, this is my first Gen Con. I got into Dungeons and Dragons over the pandemic, and I so into it that I wanted to come here. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
Or hey, this is my brother and he's super into it. He's our DM and he knows your stuff, but like now we're actually seeing it for the first time and holy crap. And then he's like, yeah, I know you guys, I told you.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I think was a boon to our hobby, uh, in regards to the pandemic and everything, is
Mm-hmm.
people found their way to our table,
Yes.
the hobby table, and many, I want to say, even our producer over here hasn't been playing D&D very long,
Mm-hmm.
and it may have been a product of the pandemic that kind of like really pushed it over the edge for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's very interesting to see, like you said, a younger crowd that
Yeah.
is ravenous and rabid about the hobby. So,
Well, I mean, even think about how I think that's what's funny is that like think about how you were right when you were a kid and
uh
you struck out at the new thing that you were finally seeing for your first time, and I think that energy hasn't changed, right? Like people, kids or whoever who start to see like what is possible in the tabletop space,
yep.
they just they just I think a couple of people I know run like after school programs even and like that stuff. They're just like, dude, they come up with the weirdest stuff and it's great. And I've never thought of it in my entire time playing ever. And I'm like, oh
Right.
yeah, I guess that would be a really interesting way to try to take this. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And they're like, yeah. Why would yes, of course I want to kiss the bullfrog. I was like, yeah, man. Okay, let's do it. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a lot of
I don't
fun.
know. I don't know how else to feel besides just like elated that
Hmm.
you know, people are finding joy in something and
Oh
also
yeah.
that like they're helping expand the hobby.
Right.
A lot of those indie games are very strong in a narrative sense
Hmm.
that they're like less concerned with the mechanics. You want to have some good mechanics so you can actually play around, but more interested in telling a story with other people. I find those deeply creative. And then I also love something like Malifaux, where it's like, okay, this rule book is only about 50 pages, but it
Right.
is everything corroborates with itself. Like everything is interacting with each other and there is a meta that you got to get to like play this game and
Yeah.
I'm super excited to keep learning it.
So you're playing. You said you're playing Malifaux,
Yeah,
and are you all gonna also kind of dive into the RPG?
I didn't know there was an RPG for Malifaux.
There,
Truthfully, I mean, this is
there is.
me since Gen Con, right? Like
Yep.
this is I am dipping a toe into an
Okay.
entire universe. Um, but if there is, I would be
There is.
interested.
There is an RPG for it. It's super fun, and obviously all the miniatures are compatible for that play.
Beautiful.
And I can imagine using Dwarven Forge terrain as a, especially the Hellscape stuff,
Sure.
for a
Well, because
couple.
you got the Burning Man.
Yeah,
I
and
at least know that.
there's a lot there that I think would be super fun, and
Yeah.
which is again one of the things that's great about Dwarven Forge is it's not just for your high fantasy games, even though Stefan is a huge D&D fan, especially first edition.
He is a they would call him devout in some circles, I believe.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
um, but the fact that you can use it with as a immersion piece for any RPG, um, is I think one of the cooler sell points of the product. Um, but
You
I've
know
heard
what?
of
I'm
what,
going to completely agree with you.
yeah. I've also heard,
I'm going to go outside the norm and I'm going to say absolutely yes.
yeah, and I've also heard another word tossed around in regards to Dwarven Forge's terrain, and I'm guessing you still all use it. Dwarvenite, is that what it's called?
So that is our sort of like trademarked term for the sort of proprietary PVC that it is made out of.
Okay. And why besides that it just goes with Dwarven Forge and Dwarvenite, it just
Right.
rings true to that. Um, what makes it special?
Okay, so it's a semi-rigid plastic, right?
Uh-huh.
So this means that it retains its form at cool temperatures, and then when you heat it up, like with warm water or whatever, it becomes more malleable.
Okay.
So a lot of the times, what ends up happening with some pieces, so there's some warpage that can happen because of thin bits or whatever, and so it makes our pieces sturdier, and it also is able to be repaired. So a lot of times in like resin fabrication, by the way, is like,
Right.
one thing that it can end up happening is eventually those molds either have to be made again or lost to time because they degrade so heavily
Mhm.
over usage that, like, by the fifth or sixth printing of stuff, a lot of people were actually experiencing it with our cavernous resin pieces. Was that like the square nature of the piece was no longer square. It was an
Okay.
imperfect, right? And it warps sometimes within creation, and there's
Right.
nothing you can do about that.
Okay.
But it's also highly durable, right? Like that,
Right.
you can beat it up, you can transport it like nothing, like easily. Like
Okay.
you can throw it in a box and just dump it all, and then take that out. And I wouldn't do that just because I've
Sure.
got the time to
Right.
have to set it back up. But like, you can, like, the that's kind of the other nature of it all, is that like we wanted to create a product that like you weren't afraid of playing on every day,
Okay.
and you weren't afraid of having kids and then or bringing kids to the table and like having a mess around with it.
Right.
um
Okay.
but we haven't figured out how to withstand the jaws of a dog.
Oh, really?
That's yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, unfortunately um how would I say it? A really determined dog will probably ruin a piece of dwarvenite within
Okay.
a few minutes.
Okay. If they treat it as a chew toy, they'll
Yeah, yeah. It's like, it is tear resistant. It is, it's resistant to
right.
these things. But as soon as like, we've had a couple of dogs just go to town on it. It's like, oh
Oof.
jeez.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
you can always say, the hounds of hell are the only things that
yes,
can
yeah.
damage a piece of dwarvenite. And that
But
again,
like you said too, like, and then on top of that, it was like, it's just cool.
yeah, it's a cool name.
It's just a cool name, and
Yeah,
that was enough.
heck yeah,
Even without the other things, right? Like, it was enough to be like, let's just call it that. That's nice.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, I've actually seen some of the big builds at like Gamehole Con or Gary Con, and
Yeah.
Stefan brings his like multiple suitcases full of terrain and
Yeah, because why would
run
you need clothes?
right, right. I mean, you're going to be in the gaming hall for the entire show, anyways.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, uh, so you don't need any of that other stuff. Um, and watching him run people through those scenarios that he puts together and uh,
Yes.
tries to kill them all in the first round.
Yeah. Yeah. I One of the first games, I actually, the only game I ever played with Stefan. Um I died by the end, so I did kind of like at least make it pretty far. But our one of our coworkers was not so lucky. He had a
Mm.
random pterodactyl take him out, which is,
A random pterodactyl just swooped in and
oh yeah.
ended his reign of terror.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's
You know,
that's
like they
random.
do.
That is
Like they
random.
do. They just, yeah, they
Yeah,
come out of nowhere.
yeah. That's wild. So what is your history in gaming? I know you mentioned earlier that you had worked at a comic book store before coming
Yes.
over there.
Yeah, I would struggle to name it because I think, none of them are watching, but like, but
Yeah, and it's
uh,
we don't have to name the comic book shop. It's
yeah, yeah.
not really relevant.
No, I worked at a comic book store. So my history with tabletop in general is that I'm one of I have a lot of brothers and sisters. I have
Okay.
9 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
My older brother, and I have a lot of cousins. And so my older brother and my cousins were really into like Magic and Dungeons and Dragons and
Hmm.
Final Fantasy and all that stuff. So I grew up in households already that were, predominantly, um, they leaned towards that already.
Okay.
And so that was kind of always part of the day to day. Like, hey, are we playing a game? When we were all over for Christmas, hey, what are we playing? That kind of stuff.
Okay.
So my brother was my dungeon master for pretty much the first three games that I ever played.
Nice.
We started with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So I got to witness as a child, as a 9-year old, the horrors of Thaco and how to how to actually like engage in a game. Um, from then, I just kind of I loved running games after seeing my brother do it, and
Okay.
so I ran games in college. Ran games for a lot of people because more times than not, I'm also an actor, and
Okay.
so I love role playing and I love world building with people. It's one of my favorite parts of game mastering. Actually,
Okay.
is the guy I'm playing Malifaux with. His name's Miles. He was one of my players, and he always knew. He knew the secret code, which was basically like, huh. So I think this could happen, and this could be a really cool story. I think I know how to phrase it to Tyler where he's just going to want to do it. And so it was
Ah,
consistently his characters were like not getting away with murder, but they were they were getting away with more stuff because he's like, but if I do this and I take this penalty, can I do that? And I was like, that sounds great. This sounds like an interesting. I was like, oh yeah, you do know the secret code, don't you? Like
nice.
there's this one little thing, and playing a lot of Lancer recently,
Okay.
which is a fantastic mech game. I love it to death,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited. There's a few games that have come out that I backed that I'm like super excited. Like Household is about to come. It's like I've been waiting for this shipment forever. It's like the borrowers essentially. Love
Okay.
it. That remaster of Pathfinder Second Edition, I'm pretty excited about. I haven't been able to play Second Edition ever, and I was like, then I heard about the remaster, and I was like, well, I guess I should just wait. I don't want to learn too much before it might shift a little bit.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say my history is I'm also an avid reader. I love sci-fi. I love
Okay.
fantasy. I'm a Tolkien kid, but I'm also an N.K. Jemisin adult.
All right.
It's a thing where stories, especially fantasy and sci-fi, are inherently to me examinations of just sort of like human pathology and like what it means to be human and um, what it means to be a hero. I think is a big thing, and that's kind
Yes.
of like what I love about Tolkien versus George R. R. Martin.
Yep.
Like Tolkien's stories is really about like what it means to be heroic, and like Aragorn fits that to a T. Like
Hmm.
Aragorn's journey to me is the more important one versus Frodo's. Frodo's is
Okay.
a great journey, but like, and Sam's, but
Right.
like Aragorn specifically. So that stuff where it's
Hmm.
like he knew his thesis and he knew what he wanted to say, and that's
Right.
one of my problems with like Martin's work, where it's like you don't know what you want to say. You just want to say that like heroes suck and everything's evil and everything sucks, man. I hate it. And it's like, oh,
Uh,
okay, yeah, sure, man, I get it. Like I also read Mark Millar. I understand. I
yeah.
know he's older than Mark Millar, but like still.
Right.
Anyway,
The
that's what I'd say.
the Millarverse is kind of interesting when you think about world building, right?
Yeah, it's yeah. I can't say I directly like despise it, but I'm like, there's just some parts of this man where you're forcing this to happen because you want something to be
Dark.
crappy and dark. Yeah, you just want something
Hmm.
to be gritty. All
Yeah.
right, man. Like, have your cake, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree. Uh, so the formula to really get you like amped into a game then is how cinematic is this going to look?
I think so. Yeah, that's
that, that
probably accurate.
that's a pretty cool way to like play a game. I always when I GM, which is almost exclusively, um,
Yeah.
I always will ask them is when they want to do something that's super outlandish. I'll be like, describe it to me as a scene in a movie, and if it
Mm,
sounds cool, we're gonna do it. and it always sounds cool, so we always
That's
do
a
it.
that's a I really like the way you phrase that. That's really not even just the ending part, but the describe it to me as you would like see it in a movie
Yeah,
is really cool. And I think that that adds so much of the dialogue between like a player and a game master,
yeah,
where you've created this really easily understood version of we're both playing right now
mhm,
and we're both writing this story right now. So tell me
right,
what you think is happening right in this moment.
absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the players, especially if you're playing with new people, right? And
Hmm.
they're like, I want to jump across this ravine or swing, throw my rope across and try to swing across or whatever. I'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
that sounds great. Now describe it to me like I said, like it's in a movie scene. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, I understand that more than that. If I just say, well, tell me how you really want to do it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and then they'll be like, "Ooh,
Like
like."
Errol Flynn fleeing across the scapes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep, or they'll be like, "Yeah, like, when Indiana Jones takes his whip." All right, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can visualize this," okay. And they also will get a little bit more in depth in their descriptive of what they're gonna do. It's super fun, and I think that's one of the greatest things about
Yeah.
our hobby, when it comes to the RP side is the DM is a narrator, but everybody's a storyteller in the game,
Yeah.
right? So
Absolutely.
it's super cool. So the chat has kind of been talking about something going on in here. It seems that there's some Kickstarter. You guys got a Kickstarter going on right now?
We've got a game found project live right
A
now
game found project.
as of
Okay.
the 10th, and there is still 9 days to join us on this project. It closes by the 25th. We
Okay.
will accept late pledges, but like, come on, join us in the campaign. Um, the big thing is that this is a reworking of our Wildlands project from 2020. We originally launched that Wildlands project which was an expanse through the forest and mountains and swamp terrain that we had never
Okay.
really touched before. We had done a little bit of forest prior to that in Caverns Deep, which was
Okay.
our sixth Kickstarter, or rather, I shouldn't say numbers. That's what Nate says anyway. Uh, is
Okay.
that when we released that originally, we were still kind of in a different mode of how we wanted to plan for the future. We were still learning things. We were still kind of growing and evolving. And since then, since our Lowtown project, for instance, like we have shifted to this model of like trying to make bundles, right? These giant, oh, if you want to build like a 2 foot by 2 foot build, here's all the small component sets that make that thing. So
Okay.
now we give people basically a formula. Now people can see that and say, oh, it's just 3 of that, 2 of that, 1 of that, and 1 of that, and I can build that. So like that
Nice.
language wasn't present in the original Wildlands project.
Okay.
Now, what we were trying to do here was kind of like, okay, how do we reconfigure what we had already done threefold? One, we wanted to, kind of reconfigure some sets, make them more compatible with that kind of attitude.
Okay.
Two, we had not done a restock of our Wildlands product yet. So this is also a pre-order for that restock. And three, that was again a model thing where it's like we
Mhm.
want to do more restocks, more pre-orders, more regularly, and this is our version of that. Because what's hard for us to do is buy a lot of product on the premise that people are going to want that specific set.
Right.
What we can do with this kind of model is we can present, right now there's about 50 sets in the project, like add-on sets.
Wow.
And it's painted unpainted, like, so it's 100 sets actually, but
Right.
it's a thing where it allows people the opportunity to say, I want this, I want this, I want this. Oh, I want 3 of that. I want to go hard on this one.
Hmm.
So we can kind of gauge it and say, we're willing to put in the money for a reorder for all of these items and
Hmm.
get some sort of stock. But this is also going to educate us on what your buying habits are, even beyond what we saw in the Kickstarter, even beyond what we saw in the initial store release. This is going to help us say, what are people really clamoring for right now? And we can also still be like in conversations with the current customer and
Right.
say, hey, this is what we want to do. Do you guys like this?
personally, what I've seen from a lot of the comments has been mostly positive. It's been a pretty good experience, and even more than pretty good. I'm just trying to temper myself and not will the the slew of like, well, actually, this sucked. And I was like, well,
Right.
you don't need to tell me everything. Just tell me the really bad stuff.
Right.
So anyway, that's that's
That's
that's,
funny.
that's our project that's going on right now, but it's on
Nice.
GameFound. We
Game found.
used to do
Okay.
it on, or rather, previously we've been exclusively on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
This is also our attempt at trying out a new platform for even some project like this.
Right.
The coolest part of utilizing GameFound for us versus something like Kickstarter is
Hmm.
the fact that we can put all the add-ons on the site at the same time,
Right.
instead of having to like put in an amount of money and then you'll get in into the pledge manager and then you can actually make your choices. People can make choices from the beginning, and I think that that's huge
That is
for
huge.
something like this. A
Yeah.
new product, that's fine. Like we may have to keep using Kickstarter for that kind of stuff, but for this kind of thing where it's a known quantity, we really want to try to stick with something that's close to our web store as possible.
Nice. And it sounds like you were saying that if someone wanted to build a very particular look that you guys have already like shown off, you can give them that whole the recipe to build that particular tower or that particular
Yeah.
dungeonscape. Um, it's kind of like Lego Master Builders, they
Oh, sure.
you
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah.
it's like, yep,
Um,
you're gonna need part 3274, 24 of those.
I mean, that's kind of my job too. Is like knowing the part numbers. So yeah, I think on another scale too, there's this thing of sometimes we do free builds, like a lot of the stuff at Gen Con when
Hmm.
we like make our stuff on the corners and things.
Yep.
That's us just trying to like freewheel a little bit and show off what is possible with the system.
Okay.
But Chris has done this really good thing on one side of the tables where we actually show what's in the store and we show
Okay.
you the exact set that comes in the box, kind of a thing. And so it's like,
Right.
hey, here's contextual. This is what you get when you buy this pack. And so to the larger point, that's what we're trying to do with the bundles as well, is saying, you may see these, individual sets and you don't know exactly how they're supposed to go together. Come look at this bundle real quick. This is what we can do with this. And what that also allows us to do, because we're building on the component sets, we don't technically even have to sell that bundle, but we
Right.
can give you the framework. We can say, put these things together with these amount of pieces, and there you go.
Oh,
Previously, when we would do like encounters or when we would do these big bundles, they were bespoke. So they had to be one pack at a time. They were just these giant orders. And it was like, nobody's going to pay $1,800 the first time they come in. Like not for their first order, most likely.
sure.
So we want to make it an easier on ramp for people. We want to show them like you can start small, you can build to this thing because here's the formula. That's all you have to worry about. Like you can get there.
Oh, that's
Um,
smart.
yeah.
That's super brilliant. I know a couple of my friends are very vocal on your guys' platforms and are show off your guys' product on a lot of the things that they do as far as like at Gen Con. So, like Kim Sugart, who's the owner of,
Mhm.
or also known as Alphinius Goo at Gooey Cube,
Oh,
uh,
right. Yeah. GUI Cube.
is a huge fan of Dwarven Forge product, and I've seen some of his builds that he's done in his studio in Colorado, and it's like, holy crap! It's like you have supported
Right.
them to the point of this is why Stefan has a castle.
Right. Right.
Right. And then the other one is a buddy of mine named Bart Hurd out of the Maryland area.
Mhm.
Works in advertising as well, oddly, and he uh, he is another huge fan of the product. And when I was working for one of my previous employers, um, one of the larger gaming distributor companies, and we did a live play stream, and Bart
Mhm.
was the GM, and he brought in his stuff, and he came in 4 hours early before we went live just to build the
Oh
terrain
yeah.
that he was going to be
Yeah.
using. It was amazing.
That can be one of the trickier parts. Is that's a comment or that's a question that can routinely be asked, is sort of
Hmm.
like, what is
how hard is it to set this stuff up, or like what's the time that it takes to do these things? And it's like, well, it's really going to depend on what you're building. If you're doing a 2-foot by 2-foot build, that's probably, and if you knew what it was going to look like,
Right.
about an hour.
Right.
But if you were testing stuff out as you're building, it can take anywhere from 2 to, sometimes those builds take forever, because especially if they get to like 4 feet, and it's like, well, I have to figure out how I'm going to stack this thing 50 millimeters high, and then I have to get another 38 millimeters on top of that. How I'm going to push this here? What piece am I using again? And then you're just lost, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know, we'll see where we're going. Try not to free build too much. I try to like go in with a purpose and say like, I want to see this thing
right
before I put a piece down.
Yeah, we've got some photos of some of the wildland stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look.
Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, there you go. Dwarven Wildlands Reforged.
It's our banner made by our lovely graphics team.
Nice. Yeah, Chris sent those over this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then what else did he send us?
We don't have anything I could. There it is. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that looks super cool.
Yeah. So we've got.
Wait a second. I'm sorry. Are those floating rock stands?
Yes.
Holy crap.
Drift stones, my friend. Yes. So a lot of the pieces within Wildlands had a host of compatibility. So those drift stones can hang off the sides of all these escarpments that you're seeing in the background.
Yeah.
Right. And the way they like, even one of those things that are pointing, like all those jagged purple rocks right there, that's just one of those drift stones turned upside down. So they also double as a lot of scatter pretty easily. But those clear stands was like, yeah, how do we make? That was kind of one of the things that we were trying to figure out from a really early stage, was like, we want to have that driftstone floating rock effect. Mm-hmm. What do we do to do that? And so we had to kind of create a universal rod system where these stands are one version of it, and then there's other ones that are just a rod that you can then put into other parts of like other pieces, and now you can have them free floating on top of your terrain as well without having to use the stand.
Those are sick,
dude. They're awesome. I love them. we also had like we had a design that was going to be flight stands as well.
Okay.
We couldn't get that one to work, so we were like, okay, we'll table that one for now, and maybe we'll be able to come back to it because we really wanted to see it. What you're seeing here is the forest. Some of the forest pieces as well. The other one was like all 3 biomes all together.
Okay.
This one is like pretty strictly forest. This is our forest mega bundle. This is about $1,200 painted, and I think it's about $700 unpainted.
Okay.
And so this is about 2 foot by 8. It's about 24 inches by 18 inches, roughly. It may even be 26 or something like that. It's just slightly odd, but one of the cool parts about this one is that it's like all of the forest floors. You're getting the sets of trees. You're getting those shimmer fronds, those like bright white blue ones over there. And you're also getting the enchanted pool, which is like one of my favorite pieces. It's just like this clear piece that we painted over. And so it gives that like nice little ripple effect in the water. Yeah.
It looks great. I like those things with the little white tendrils coming out of them.
Yeah, those are the shimmer fronds right there.
Yeah, those are really cool. They definitely like give you that Feywild kind of vibe.
My other 2 favorite pieces in this photo are the hollow hedge, which is like there's a hedge just to the right of one of those shimmer fronds, and that is actually hollow underneath, so you could actually like hide a miniature under there if you want.
Oh, nice.
Which is the intention. And then all of these trees that you see are one piece. They're solid dwarvenite as well. So like they are not frock trees, which I have seen. I don't hate, train set trees that much, but the big problem is like, all the spongy stuff just starts to deteriorate and break away, and it's just debris everywhere. So that's kind of one of our things that we did in this project, was like, oh man, we would love to make like one piece trees that fit within the system, that are modular, that also don't like break apart so easily so that you can actually do. And so the conifers are my favorite. Those conifer trees,
Pines,
like
yeah,
the pines. Oh man, I love them so much. I mean, I'm also from the Northwest, so like I'm
right.
just like I think I'm predisposed to
Okay.
love anything that is close to a Douglas fir.
I like the roots, that you guys have on the bases of those too, where it looks like
Mhm.
they're hanging over the rock, or are they like attached to the rock, or is that a just an effect of the tree itself that you made the roots
So
of it?
so the tree, so for instance, that one on the left, the big conifer on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
So that it has a stump and you can remove the whole tree from the bottom stump. And
Okay.
that is its own individual sculpt. And so all of that root system is a part of the sculpt that the tree sits in. We also do have some like projecting roots that you
Hmm.
can get on top of that, so it like starts to like break out and move away from the pieces. But pretty predominantly everything that has a stump also then has like some sort of root system attached to, so it's pretty cool. And this is the swamp system. So like
Yes.
the swamp is something that predominantly uses negative space. These pieces, most of our floor pieces like they square off at the edges,
Right.
so they're meant to like butt up against each other and make really cool like landscapes. The swamp pieces terminate at the ground level, so they start at like 11 and then at like a 45-degree angle, pretty much like start to terminate towards the actual table,
Okay.
giving it that effect of like continuing to go deeper. And what I love about these pieces so much, the swamp was so cool because it's like it's like a 15 piece set, if I recall right. No, it's 13. It's 13 pieces, and you can do so much with just those 13 pieces. Even if you used no trees, right? Like there's so much character
Right.
involved in every single bit of the swamp banks
Hmm.
that like you barely have to do much on top of it to give that sense of danger or character in a build,
Right.
and that's one of my favorite parts about it.
So when it comes to the product coming unpainted and or painted,
Yeah.
are you are the are you guys at the studio doing the painting, or is it overseas, or
It's
who's
still by our factory. So what we do is we create our paint masters, right? Like
Yep.
we make the designs. It's the same thing with the sculpts, right? We don't cast the sculpts in house either and send them out. The factory is the one who our factory is the one who helps us manufacture the product from start to finish. They
Hmm.
also package it for us, so like that's a huge boon for us in that regard.
Right.
But all those designs are then um, evaluated, is what I would
Okay.
say, right? Like
Okay.
we have to go through a QC process. We have to make sure that things, and sometimes things go awry. Sometimes things aren't always what we want them to be. So we consistently have to kind of like keep on our toes and be ever mindful of like, hey, if it's been 2 years since we've ordered this product, we
Right.
probably need to send an updated master. We probably need to make sure that we've looked at the stuff and we have what we want.
Right.
um and that just comes down to us, right? Like that comes
Sure.
down to our side, but our factory is really good about our communication, and they're really helpful. They're
Good.
always mindful of like, hey, if you really want to try to cut some cost on this, in the sense of, is there a way that we might be able to do this in 2 steps rather than 3 steps, because then we can do this a little bit easier. And so our paint team is consistently so like is top tier, in the sense that like that is number one consideration every single time they touch a piece, is like,
Hmm.
what's the simplest way I can do this, and then what's the steps that I can go beyond that. Like
Okay.
they really try to get down to the root of it and say like, here's what can represent a piece, and here's why I want to take it one step further, because it creates this imaginative landscape, even just with this additional color.
Right.
That was one thing that we saw with like the Dread Hollow forest stuff, was that originally the forest was like a little too complicated, and so the factory was having a little bit hard time like keeping up with it. So we
Okay.
reduced the difficulty of it, and we've seen personally greater results because of it. It's like
Okay.
we're seeing more consistency, and that's what I care about the most. And what is also nice sometimes about the painted stuff from my side is that I'm like, I don't always have time to paint everything,
Right.
and it's nice to kind of just have a thing that even if it's pre-painted, and I decided, hey, you know what, I want to give it an extra little bit of color, and I want to give
Hmm.
it a little bit extra character.
Right.
Most of the steps have already kind of been done that I can probably do that a little bit easier. So
Right.
that's one of my things. I'm like, I
Yeah.
think about that, but like, there's also a cost thing. Some people are like, I like
Absolutely.
getting unpainted because it makes me sure that I get everything I wanted. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
right there with you. I
Yeah.
completely understand. Do
Totally
what you need
understand.
to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm betting that the community of all your what do you guys call your community members? Do you have
um,
a nickname for them?
Unfortunately, I'm saying unfortunately. I'm also the curmudgeon of our office. Just watch out.
Okay.
They're called doofers, I believe, is what they
Okay.
were called for a
All right.
while. I don't
All right.
know if that's still true,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure it's
Do they
doofers.
know they're called this?
I think they were the ones who came up with it. I don't
Okay.
think it was us. So
Okay.
that's what I mean. I haven't heard any other ones, so
Okay.
I don't think so.
So I'm guessing that within the community of the doofers, which is funny,
Yes.
that there have been some amazing unpainted models and terrain pieces that have been painted by the community that just are like out of this world. And if
From our pieces.
yep,
Yes.
and I'm guessing that you guys probably have some place where people can go and share these wonderful pieces.
We absolutely do. We
Hmm.
have a Discord,
Okay.
and we also, I think we still have a forum.
Hmm.
So you are welcome to do that. But the Discord is going to be the easier place to go do
Sure.
that.
And
Um,
is there links on your guys' like Facebook page or website to
there
go to
is
the Discord?
indeed.
Cool.
I believe Chris is in chat, and Chris, if you wouldn't mind just
Hmm.
popping the link to the Discord real quick, because I wish I knew what it was or could put it in the chat myself, but I cannot.
Because
Uh,
I would love to share like some builds that I'm gonna try to put together
oh,
because
absolutely.
now I got to go and back this thing.
Well, hey man, hey, one of my favorite parts of either of that, right? Like the Discord thing first, great community. I try to go on the Discord every now and then to try to
Hmm.
like help the burden of answering all the Discord stuff from Chris, but I do not
Right?
do it enough. Um, but the community there is very cool.
Yeah.
Um, it is I don't know. I've seen about 95% positive sort of interactions happening there from my side, and I really like. There's a couple of channels that are distinctly about like how to build and how to
Hmm.
paint some stuff, and oh, what's the history of this thing? And hey, if you want a random piece, we have like a very very small Dwarven Forge eBay where if people are looking for specific items and people are
Right.
willing to sell, give them up or whatever, people are like, yeah, cool, I'll do that. And they have their own little thing, which is
Okay.
great for some of those chase pieces where somebody's like, I
Hmm.
really just want this one thing. And another person's like, I don't want it anymore. So here you go.
Right.
um, but the other thing is that like, I think that like, there's something to be said about, that level of interaction again, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like, like it's there's not a lot of positive things to say about social media, but I think that's the only thing that I've ever taken away from it that I was like, this is probably the thing I like the most, is being able to share that kind of stuff with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, I have a friend group back in Portland that I, introduced D&D to essentially.
Okay.
And we've all stayed really good friends through a number of years and a number of events. And like, what it always came back to for me was like the sharing of something, the sharing of a game, or the sharing of an idea, the sharing of a passion. And
Right.
I think that's what I see in our Discord, and that's kind of nice. I just kind of think that
Nice.
that's pretty neat that like people want to talk to each other about that stuff.
Hmm.
I also appreciate that most people are pretty normal. Like the most of the
Right.
people, most of the people that are like that I interact with
Right.
are decent humans.
Yeah.
Where I'm not having to like
But
turn myself. I think.
sure.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is everybody I've ever interacted with at shows or at just at like game stores that say that, oh, I use Dwarven Forge, or
Yeah.
or whatever. They have all been super kind, and they want to show off their builds. They just want to. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, I just built this like really cool like
Yes.
castle entrance way for an upcoming scenario that I'm running, and I get as geeked and hyped about it, because when they come with that kind of energy, you cannot help but be like, oh yeah,
Yes.
right,
So let me ask you. I don't
yeah.
know. Let me flip the script on your interview.
Oh,
What,
what?
where, how did you start? Well, what you tell me your story, right?
Oh, wow.
Hey, it's episode 1, baby.
It is episode 1, season 2, right
So
here.
yeah,
Getting to know Rick now. Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
so my story behind like getting into like tabletop gaming is, it all started with board games with me. As
Hmm.
a young kid back in the late '70s and early '80s, every Sunday we would go to my grandparents' house, and all the cousins.
Yep.
After dinner, we would play like Monopoly or Life or Sorry.
And then
Uh,
Monopoly would get banned, and then you would.
Right, we'd have fights, yeah,
Yeah,
as one does.
yeah.
But in 1982, I was staying at my cousin Troy's house, and for like the summer, and he had a couple of his friends over, and they were playing a role playing game, and there was only four of them, and they're
Hmm.
like, 3 years older than me, and they're like,
Got
Rick,
it.
we need another player. Can you come join us? And I was like, what is this game? And they were playing a module set called G1, 2, and 3 Against the Giants. And I was like, okay, I'll make a Robin Hood like character. And they're like, you're gonna play a ranger then. It's like, cool, I like that. And so 3 weeks later, I'm the dungeon master because all they wanted to do was play.
Jesus.
And so that's like my introduction to the game. And what's really funny
Yeah.
is I've been playing it ever since, and I've always found my friends groups and circles around the game. When I was in the military for 20 years, and in that
Hmm.
time, you go to a new duty station, always
Yeah.
find the local game store, and you're in it. You're playing
Yeah.
D&D with all new best friends,
Yeah.
right? Um, and now it's kind of fun to be a part of the industry, right? You know, going to Gen Con, going to dinner with Mr. Atkinson.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Right? I never would have imagined that my cousin, um, who used to pick on me relentlessly, him and his friends, they were all jocks,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I was not back then. And they would
At least
relentlessly,
back then.
right? And they were just they picked on me relentlessly, and
Oh yeah.
I always thought it was, is it self-loathing because you all play D&D too, nerds?
Oh, dude, man, I used to work. So one of the other jobs that I was super unceremoniously fired from was Home Depot. And while I
Oh,
was working at
nice,
Home Depot, I was working with some of my friends from Portland,
nice.
some of that same group, and and so we were playing D&D, and we were just talking, and we were hanging out, and one of them comes back, one of my managers. He was like, "What are you guys talking about?" And I was like, "Oh, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. It's my favorite game." He goes, "You
Mm,
guys play Dungeons and Dragons?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You guys are adults. You guys make believe." I was like, "Hey, don't you have a fantasy football league? Like, don't you just do a whole bunch
yeah.
of random numbers and try to watch people and dress up for your favorite team and put face paint on?" And he's like, "It's
Mm.
different." I'm like, marginally.
Marginally different.
Like, you make up a team name, dude. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, do you make up a manager's name too? You have
yeah,
you're making NPCs. I don't know what I don't
yeah.
know what to tell you, man. Like,
I not, and again, I particularly don't watch a lot of sports unless it's like
and
the
it's no
Olympics and stuff.
disrespect. It's just
Not
so
at all.
funny. It's so
Not at all.
it's that funny.
But I have those same interactions, and when I do,
Yeah,
I always be like, "So you're into football or baseball or soccer? What comes after the name of that sport?"
yeah.
It's a soccer
It's
game.
game.
It is a baseball game.
Yeah.
So
Oh
everybody's
man.
a gamer. It's just a different
Well,
spin.
it's the same. You know what's funny too is, I'm an actor, I'm a writer on top of
Yeah,
that. So like I also have a lot of friends who are from that world,
yeah,
who are from like the art side, and they have no problems with D&D.
yeah.
Right? They're into it. They're like, "Oh my god, a chance to act with nobody holding me back.
fantastic. I'll do it. But when you then talk about them sports, they're like, oh, sports ball. Oh, I'm like,
right.
people show up to watch you wear tights. All right. Like yet
Yes.
again, like it's just the same
The
thing.
same
Like,
thing.
do not let us not throw stones at each other, because the
Right.
only people who need to be stoned are the oligarchs. Okay. Like, I don't know what there's so little in this world that we can all
Right.
connect on. Can we please
Right.
just do it together?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so fun. I recently went to a baseball game at one of the local um, ballparks here in Michigan,
Mhm.
and for one of the farm teams, the Lansing Lugnuts, and I had a great time. The people were awesome, and it was for a
That's
comic
a
book
great
night.
name too.
Yeah,
I love that. That's so good.
and it was super fun, and we were there because it was Marvel or superhero night,
Okay.
and this is where I find it super interesting in regards to just how connected all of it is.
Yeah.
Right? Is you had all these folks that were there to watch baseball coming up because we were vending. We were selling like comic books and pop vinyls and some
Mhm.
stuff. And they were all into it, or asking questions, or saying that I have a weekly D&D game, and all sorts of stuff. And I was just like, yeah, this is the world I wanted to be. I wish would have existed in the '80s,
Oh yeah.
uh, but I'm glad that it exists now because it's so much more inclusive in regards to gameplay and just people
Yeah.
being fandoms or just curious, right? I'd rather people be curious than not, right?
Well, I think there's a thing you were saying there too that I think is key to that as well, which is even beyond just curiosity, but to have the capacity to be open to other experiences, to other
Yeah,
mindsets, and to other like viewpoints.
100%. Yeah,
And I
100%.
think it's paramount to playing a game with somebody else, to doing any activity with another person, even if you've known them for years, is to have the willingness and the openness to say, like, all right, maybe we're going to get some, we might discover something in this game that we had never thought about before, or that we never knew about each
Right.
other. And also just to be careful about some of that stuff, and to be mindful of like
Yeah,
what those things mean to certain people. A lot
absolutely.
of that talk about like session zero,
Hmm.
and lines and veils, right?
Yep.
Like those things that what a great, personally, a thing of when I grew up playing, that was never an option, in the sense
Yeah.
of it was not part of the conversation. And so
Right.
for us to reach that point where that is not only a part of the conversation, but it's one of the first steps in it, is to try to establish something that we're
Hmm.
all playing the game that we want to play.
Right. Yeah, I
I think
think
it's great.
I think it's a huge step forward in our hobby for sure.
Yeah.
And we have some really fun comments in the chat. I don't know if
Please.
you're
Yeah. Yeah.
monitor.
I'm like,
Uh, and it kind of like aligns with what we're talking here. So JP is just saying that he first saw the Dwarven Forge stuff in the mid '90s at the Complete Strategist on 33rd Street.
oh
And
yeah,
you
we were there. Yeah.
talk about a store, right? That
Yeah.
that store is one forever old, and
There's somehow it's equal parts like from the 18th century and also from 2018. Like, I
right.
don't get it.
It's like a cave of wonders when you go in there, right?
Yeah.
Like you got Aladdin walking into the cave of wonders. Don't touch anything, but
No.
there'll be stacks of stuff, and you'll look at the top, and it'll be a brand new iteration of some game that just came out last
Yeah.
week, and then on the very bottom of that stack is something that was released in 1984.
Dude, if you eye that piece that's on the top, though, it just automatically starts to shift and fall, and you're like, all right, I gotta stop looking
Right.
at it. I just
Yep.
gotta be careful here.
It's such a
It's
cool store.
everything is it's railway building, everything
Mhm.
is so tight. I like those guys at the same time that I'm like, you guys don't do you talk to people often?
Right.
There is this energy of like, I think I was talking about, I can't remember who I was talking about it with, but it was another distributor, or like, another person from the industry.
Hmm.
And she was like, yeah, they're weird and nice, but at the same time also rude. And that like it's so short, it's all these weird things. And I went in one time and I was like, oh, I'm looking for this, and they're like, no, we don't have it. And she's like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. They're like, yeah, but like, why would you want that? And she's like, well, I don't need to answer this question, that's fine. And she walked
Right.
away. Like 3 weeks later comes back and he's like, hey,
you're the one who wanted that weird thing, right? We got it now. Do you want it? And she's like, so you remembered, but you're also being like really
Aggressive.
weird about it. Like, I don't get it.
And
I want it. You're correct. Is this just a New York thing?
that's what I was just about to say. That sounds
Yeah,
very New York, where
it's
they're like,
very New York.
"Hey, yo, I saw that you
Hey,
came back in my
you see me?
store."
You want it? Yeah. Hey, boss. Hey,
Yeah,
boss. You want the sandwich?
yeah, it's so
I
good.
could have said any sandwich, but I
Eh,
just said sandwich. So.
Just sandwich, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll take that." That is so funny, and it is very New York.
Yeah.
That is so brilliant. Um, JP also mentioned, he goes, I was highly disappointed when I found out that fantasy football had nothing to do with what I thought it was about.
It's not Blood Bowl. It's not.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not orcs versus elves on the field of
Man.
sport. And
There
then
could be
finally,
something there. There could be something fun there. I just
Dragos
never
Von
played.
Dragos. Is that one of your guys?
Yeah.
Dragos Von
Dragos
Dragos?
is one of us.
All
Yeah.
right. He says our group loves D&D and sports. A couple of my players went nuts that our room at the JW had a view of the baseball field. It was like they had never seen baseball before. That is awesome.
Oh, that's great.
And that's a beautiful stadium too, right there next to as far as the
Yeah.
baseball stadium next to the JW in
Yes.
Indy. Yeah, very cool.
We have I just went to a baseball game right before Gen Con with a couple people from the office and their partners. And
Nice.
the reason we did that was because a hamster's, partner, she's recently transplanted into New York, and she's become the biggest Mets fan ever.
Oh
And I
no,
was like, get ready then. That was what Chris and I were telling her. We were like, okay, like get ready for the long haul.
that's awesome.
They have not won a series since like 1952. So, or I think they may have won more than one, but I just like they haven't been like really good since a long time ago. And she's like, you just gotta believe. And over the course of the past 2.5 weeks, she's been like, her posts have gone from "Let's go Mets" to like hashtag RIP Mets.
Oh,
It's one of my favorite things that I've ever seen in my life. Is just somebody slowly evolving to understand what it means to really be a Mets fan, or like to be like a fan of a team that does not win often, but
that's
is
super
like
funny.
not going to get kicked out because they're a staple. I love it.
Okay, we got some more photos we'd like to show.
Yeah,
Let's take a peek here.
do it.
What do we got?
I'm not going to tell you no.
What is this one?
Ooh, who's that? Oh, yeah. So this, I believe this is Chris is again in chat, so he may be able to speak to it specifically, but I believe this is a fan build. I don't know for sure,
It is.
but I'm seeing this is more caverns
Mhm.
with potentially some Thor mountains in there. That was a Casper Kenobi build. Yeah.
Okay.
Casper Kenobi's great. So we're seeing the cavern's floor there is like an LED light, so
Okay.
it'll push through and I think he's probably got a couple extra lights in there for dramatic effect. But this is the other side. Oh yeah,
Wow.
that's all caverns, and the back there, I believe that is still caverns cliffs. Yeah, so that's still just a whole caverns build.
God.
Very, very cool with all the other underdew mushrooms and things like that.
Yeah,
It's rad.
that is super cool. Dang. Oh
And then we
man.
got the oh god, this is the dread portal. So this was a resin. So the actual like big structure you're seeing there with the two
Mhm.
giant obelisks, that
Mhm.
is a resin piece. That is like
Okay.
sometimes, so we used to just like every once in a while do an additional like special edition resin thing.
Okay.
After Wildlands, I believe we had to stop because the factory finally closed. So like we don't really have an ability to do it anymore. But now we're seeing also some of the castle fieldstone. Oh, actually, that's like city builder fieldstone
Mhm.
with some dungeons and the Shrine of Sasul. This looks like an Asurek like ending of Tomb of Annihilation kind
It
of a thing.
does.
That's rad.
Yeah. It looks great.
So that dread portal in the back is just green, but it's clear resin, like painted green. So you can do that light, and it'll give that kind of like additional effect on the back there.
Yeah. That's super cool.
This is hellscape for sure.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So I think I can't tell if it's a post-process fog or if the fog is actually on the table, but that's certainly some sort of light panel or a similar effect to,
Yeah.
because that's the thing with the hellscape stuff, they're all translucent. So it's like
Right.
this translucent yellow, so you can shine a light underneath. And the way that it's painted, basically the opaque parts are dark, and then the non-opaque, like the more translucent bits, are going to be this yellow orange. So it really gives it that pop of being like, running magma, lava flow kind of stuff.
Man, that looks freaking sick.
Yeah,
If,
yeah. Whoever
if I
did
were,
this, I
he
think.
says Fog Monster 2, maybe. Yeah, because Dragos von Dragos is saying Fog Monster 2 on that.
Yeah. Oh, I think he might be talking about what has created the fog on the table,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
Because Fog Monster is a thing, and you can even see a little. So this is dungeon ledges and stuff over probably another like light panel that's got like a green filter on top. But right next to the ledges on the left hand side in the bottom left, what you can actually tell is that's some of our original resin Den of Evil. Or
Oh,
that might be Two of the Ancients, Realm of the Ancients. It's either Realm of the Ancients or Den of Evil. I can't remember exactly.
okay. The
Pretty
ones,
sure.
the ones that have like the chaos symbol in the centers.
Yes.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, those look great. My
Yeah.
whole thing is every time I see these builds, right, that are,
Right.
I mean, they're so dynamic and they're so beautiful. If I were a player and I was walking into a room for the night, we're knowing that we're getting ready to sit down and play, and the GM was like had multiple like scenarios set up around the area,
Right.
I would I would flip. Oh, I just go crazy, right?
I
Because
I wouldn't know what to do either. I'd be like, well, I guess we're gonna have a good time tonight.
right, because I love the visual effects of the immersion that occurs when you have the amazing terrain on
Mhm.
the table for RP sessions. Even though the theater of the mind is great, having being able to be like, I just jumped over, or I just
Yeah.
uh, went across that lava pit to get to the center to fight the big bad, or use some crazy magic item and had a way to display that effect visually.
Yeah.
It's just it's an experience that I think everybody should at least try once.
That's something that we're discussing as a team, sort of like how can we get on more tables for games?
Hmm.
Not just customer wise, and your own private tables, but can we go to conventions and be on people's tables so that people can just play?
Yeah.
Because like there's the one again, another thing about like selling direct to customer for us is that it's like we don't we don't sell anything at the convention right now.
Right.
We're attempting to change a little bit of that with some of the like the reliquaries things, and like we're really trying to keep the conversation going about we don't want to like never sell anything, but just like the economics really aren't there for us to do it
Sure.
when we get to sell direct to customer in other ways. But we want to be on tables that like people get to play games while they're there,
Right.
and that experience, because you're exactly right, it's so key. I've got a player, Miles, it has aphantasia, so
Okay.
cannot picture things in his head very clearly or pretty much at all when they're described to him like that. So that visual is necessary, nearly imperative to have for him to understand like this is the spatial reasoning between you and this object or you and this
Yep.
other enemy or whatever. It's also why games like Baldur's Gate 3 are doing so numbers. It's like not only is the story doing well, but like
Right.
people are also getting an opportunity to play the game, play D&D even in a way that is conducive to like, cool, I don't have to I'm not to say it this way, but it's like this why there's more players than there are DMs, right? Where it's like, oh cool, I don't have to think about it. Great.
Right.
I'm gonna click over here and I'm gonna click this thing.
Yeah.
And when you have that already built in, I will say, I grew up on pen and paper stuff, like
Yep.
not even just theater of the mind, but like, my brother, we would have like a mat or something and we would just like draw stuff out, and we repurposed the pewter miniatures from the Lord of the Rings Monopoly set we had to
Okay.
like like circumvent some of that. And what I would have even appreciated is stuff that like we do with our scatter stuff, right?
what's cool about our scatter is like it breaks the Z-axis and it gives you things to physically hide behind with your miniature.
Right.
It gives you things to like interact with on the terrain. And I had a couple people even at the convention talk to me about like, well, I've invested in this TV table. And I'm like,
Right.
I love TV table. I'm all for it.
Mhm.
It's so cool. Like, what a great idea. What a great
Right.
way to do like additional immersion and
Mhm.
have like fog of war already built into your system. And they're like, yeah, that's kind of the problem though, is that like, I don't want to, I can't put like a bunch of sculpted terrain on there now too. On top of that, I was like, well, I get that. So that's what
Mhm.
the scatter is there for too. Like you can actually utilize that and have trees and you can still move around and like you can
Right.
say, here's a visual representation of this thing on the table. And then when you're leaving that scene, just take your scatter off and put some new ones on or whatever. If you keep
Right.
it pretty light, you're not going to have to worry about like building an entire 2 foot by 2 foot build because you already
Right.
have your TV. So it's
Right.
like all these different ways that you can mix and match both our terrain or like what your game wants to have and what your game wants to
Mhm.
be.
Yeah, and with the scatter terrain, if someone is using a TV as a terrain piece, they don't have to worry about potentially putting too much weight on the TV because the scatter terrain isn't going to
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
overload it.
lot of the scattered terrain has like is the weight is super
Mhm.
reduced. So
Yeah,
like yeah, you can just do nice little bits everywhere, and
yeah,
it also helps to maybe you can also utilize it as a way to like highlight certain things that you want your players to be curious about.
right.
Or hey, I can visually pick that up on the table easier than a flat graphic because I'm
Right.
understanding, oh, how big is that bush? How big is that tree? Can I climb that tree? If the tree
Mhm.
actually has a z-axis, then the kid's like, great, I can climb that tree, so I'm going to
Yeah,
go climb that tree. That
absolutely.
level of, I think that's one of the other things about terrain versus theater of the mind that ends up being an interesting tug of war where I think you said this earlier, right? With the tell me like you would in a movie
Yeah.
is like that comes with a degree of understanding the space,
Oh,
not as a
absolutely.
criticism, but more as like as a bonus, being like,
Yeah.
yeah, if you think you understand the space, tell me that you understand the space, and
Hmm.
we're gonna say this works. Yeah, there is a little log hanging off the side of the upper parapet, and you can actually grab onto that log. However,
Hmm.
your weight is what are you gonna do? Like that
Right.
theater of the mind can be really quick, but if you also have something set up where you've already put that log on top of a parapet hanging off there within the terrain as like an actual setup, that already becomes part of the conversation too. It's like, can I reach that log that's sitting
Yep.
right there? Because it's right there. Is that actually supposed to be there? And you're like, yes, it's supposed to
Yeah.
be there. You can totally reach that. Those conversations get to happen at that same pace, I think. And that's what's really
Right.
neat about either side.
Okay.
I know that was
So
a huge diatribe of,
no,
of,
that was
of, of
great. I mean,
whatever. So like, yeah.
no, the producer was just saying we got about 30 minutes left in our show.
Okay.
But one of the questions follow up to this uh, little
Yeah.
conversation is getting it on more tables. You guys have had some great success in getting your terrain on some very high profile tables with partnerships that you've created with different like
Yeah.
live stream companies or
Yeah.
performers. Uh, could you name or talk to that? Is like how is that?
Could you, yeah, could I name?
Could name drop a few of those, and
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
how is that translated to growth of the company, over since those kind of things have started happening? Because I think that's something that's a curiosity piece for a lot of people that are new to the game space or are streamers themselves and wondering, you know, what's it like to be a partnership with a company like yourself, and what's the give and take, and what's the benefit, you know, for you and also the streamers.
Yeah, so we've been on a couple of tables. Uh we've been on Critical Role
Hmm.
throughout campaign 2. We were sponsoring campaign 2 for a good chunk of it. I think basically until around the pandemic we kind of there was less of it involved. That was also because what the pandemic was, right? Like
Yep.
what the early stages of that, we are still in it, but like in the early stages of it, it was those kind of things where it's like they're barely even playing on terrain right now because of the nature of their production.
Yep.
So we weren't featured as much. But we did that. Matt and Liam are
Mhm.
longtime customers of us anyway. So we love talking with Matt, and sometimes he'll I think I think right before Lowtown came out, he was doing something. He was doing a couple builds where he was like, "I'm really looking for something like this. Do you guys have maybe anything right now?" Or like, "I'm looking for this piece, but I didn't see it in stock." And we're like, "Oh, okay. Well, I think we have one in the warehouse, so we'll see. I think we have like one in like a reserve copy or something."
Nice.
So it's stuff like that where it's like, that's a known entity to us. That's a thing that we've done regularly. We also are working with. Gosh, I should be careful. No, we were on the train. Acquisitions Inc. We've been
The Penny
doing.
Arcade guys.
Yeah, Penny Arcade guys. We've been doing
Yeah.
their stuff. In fact, we're going to have our terrain on the live show for West in a couple weeks.
Nice.
There's gonna be a game out there, and then we've also been on Dimension 20 shows.
Nice.
Couple of them. I think. What was it? Well, I think one of the. Jasmine Boular's game, and I'm struggling to remember the name right now for whatever reason, but yeah. So we've been on a couple. So a partnership with us looks like, for one, we benefit from the awareness of getting to new people that we haven't maybe talked to before.
Right.
A lot of our customers are DMs, right?
Yes.
So that's a huge part of our base is like we don't get a lot of players coming in and being like, "I'll buy terrain."
Right.
So that's one thing is that like, how much of that market have we already hit? And so that's one of the things we kind of evaluate if we're going to be doing a Oh, we also did Corridor Digital Show, Son of a Dungeon.
Oh, nice.
Where they photo mapped the pieces and then like played on them in front of a green screen kind of a thing. It's pretty neat. It was really neat process, really neat production. Highly recommend like checking it out. Yeah. All the shows that I was talking about, please check them out if you haven't already. Critical Role is, one of our, number one ones, but like Dimension 20's content is, especially if you want something in like 20 episodes or less to like give you a full rounded experience and story.
Right.
Brennan and Gabe, and Jasmine and Abria. I can't remember if anybody else is. I think have been one or two other people who have run the games for them, but I can't remember. All of them have been just like something so wild and fun to watch. And when they use terrain as well, it's really cool. Anyway, the point being that like our partnerships are usually based on like mutual understanding and respect, and like, hey, we want to utilize your terrain on our show and we want to promote it. We want to tell people to go, where they can find it. But we also love your terrain because it's the premier stuff and it can really help us tell our story. And so we don't usually see, I'll be honest, like we don't typically see a lot of sales come out of those things.
Okay.
But it's the brand awareness and being able to work with people that we really respect and work with people that we really like, that I think comes strongest in those conversations and in those partnerships for us, is that like we get to help other people who are leaders in the industry or people in the industry, and that's kind of like part of it, I guess.
Oh yeah,
I guess that might be a weird answer, but I just mean like that's kind of the energy that we try to go into all that stuff with, and so we're pretty selective because of that. Yeah. Because we don't directly usually see a lot of like innate returns from those things. It becomes a thing where we're like, yeah, okay, well we gotta like be a little bit more careful about how we do it. There is one question out here that I want to answer from JP. JP, you're saying any plans for sci-fi terrain sets? Yes. And also Dragos, I didn't realize those were your builds. Fantastic job. They were wonderful. And it was Den of Evil. Okay.
Nice.
But yes, JP, we do have plans for sci-fi sets. We are actually the next project we will be doing, which is spring 2024, March or April 2024, is going to be our not our first ever sci-fi endeavor, but our first Dwarvenite sci-fi endeavor. We had a resin sets long time ago that were much more like, if you wanted to make like a TOS Enterprise level, like kind of hokey, like 60s, futuristic sci-fi. but our sci-fi offering will be available then. I'm super excited about it too, because we're in the final stages of sculpting right now.
Nice.
So we're almost done with all the actual designs, and they're, I don't know how to say it, but like it's just so cool. Like,
Yeah.
like I wish I could say, I wish I could have a more educated way to say it, but it's like we're doing something that we haven't done before, and so it gets to be that thing where it's like we're not trying to even copy ourselves.
Right.
We're not trying to match. That was the last project where it was like, okay, we also have to match in some cases what we did 8 years ago, but what we did 8 years ago we wouldn't want to do right now because it was bad, or like we didn't agree with it. We let it. It's like, so we were like consistently having to maneuver, but with sci-fi it's been like a clean slate, and so we get to do so much. What I will say is we're trying to do a sort of rundown kind of Millennium Falcon
Ooh,
Firefly vibe, right?
okay.
Not like diesel punk, but like
Right.
just lived in kind of that nature of some of this greebling doesn't make sense and goes nowhere, and it's just
Okay.
aesthetic, but also just that weathered kind
Yeah.
of ship that you've been living in for 30 years.
Nice. And
Yeah.
that'll be kind of cool because I want to say that next year we'll be getting Starfinder Second Edition from
Hmm.
Paizo, and that'll be a really cool, like, marriage potential for players and GMs uh,
Yeah.
for that stuff. Be like,
Yeah. I mean, our hope is certainly to uh our hope is something like that, right? Like we
yeah,
want we and what was funny too was like we just wanted to do sci-fi because twofold. We've been on the slate to do sci-fi since 2020
right.
because Nate at the last stream of Wildlands was like, if we hit 4 million, we'll do sci-fi. And my excitement, I'm gonna steal a line from Sam Rice real quick. My excitement shifted to fear
Oh
immediately
no,
because it was so much of like a, you've just promised something that we don't know when we would do it, and we don't know if we're going to be able to, like,
right?
why would you do this to me? But you know,
Perfect.
it's turned out to be this like really fun and great project that we're already doing.
Nice.
And the other thing that's really cool about it to me is that like when we then went to Gen Con and they're like, and we're doing second edition Starfinder, we were like, we were already wanting to talk about Starfinder. This is fantastic. Like
Perfect.
we can now by the next year we can show it off a little bit. Maybe we'll play a session or something. We'll show it off and be like, hey, you know, we love these guys and you got to go support their game. But if you see anything here that you're excited about, like come and join us now. And one of the big things too about that project in particular, as well as this Reforged project that we're currently in that ends next Friday at the 25th.
Oof.
Or oh boy, I got to get it in there, you know. But
Yep.
the thing that's really fun about our sci-fi project is it is going to be a smaller offering. Most
Okay.
times when we do our Kickstarters, it's like 215 pieces, 210 pieces, or whatever.
Right.
It's 90 sets, and it's so much, and it's overwhelming for some people. And then
Right.
even for us, it's like, okay, well, our target markers have to hit here, and we have to do this much processing, and we have to do this much, you know, post processing, we have to do this much production, and then how do we take the photos and how do we take the videos and how do we tell everything. So
Right.
one of the things that I've been sort of trying to champion in our business, and we've been doing better about as we've been moving forward, is limiting our scope,
Okay.
focusing it, even basically is the
Right.
idea that like we can get more out of this and we can get better results if the offering is understood on the first watch,
Okay.
and within the first 10 minutes, if somebody gets in and like understands it immediately. So this sci-fi stuff is going to be smaller than our typical giant Kickstarter. But what that also means is that our post processing is going to take less time because we
Wow.
make injection mold, because
Yep.
we do everything out of like, you know, 100-pound, you know, 300, 500-ton steel molds.
Right.
You know, that takes a degree of like 2 months per piece kind of thing. Like
Oof.
it's just like the actual development time and
Hmm.
manufacturing time on those things are just long.
Right.
So when you're doing 200 pieces, that just like ends up being very, very
Labor intensive, it sounds.
Labor intensive for sure.
Yeah.
And so what we get with a thing that comes down to like 30 pieces or 35 pieces is what would take us normally 18 months is now going to take us 6 to 7 months.
Wow.
So by the time we actually get through our sci-fi offering, the full playtest of Starfinder Second Edition will be out.
Okay.
And so people would then start to like get their pieces and be able to at least play the playtest. Because I think what Second Edition said was the playtest is next August, and then the game probably wouldn't be fully out till the following year, I think is what they said.
Oh, okay.
So it's like that. It's that where it's like we're trying to. It wasn't even a part of our radar, but it was a thing where we're like, that's part of our movement, and that's what I'm excited about probably the most is that like we're going to be able to be on people's tables and potentially have an expansion on that material by the time the game actually releases. So it's just kind of like this huge thing for me where I'm like, I'm super excited about that.
Well, I know that you had mentioned early into this that you were a big fan of not just fantasy but also sci-fi, and
Yes.
I literally just felt all of that.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, but it's that it's weird that I sometimes think that I'm maybe more of a sci-fi nerd than a fantasy nerd, but I think that also just comes down to my writing. When I'm writing for comics or when I'm writing for screenplays and stuff, it's like I usually drift towards that.
Okay, I can dig it.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool, man.
Thank you.
We got to do some shout outs for our sponsors real quick. So we'd like to say thank you to all of our sponsors, to include Game Envy, who are the makers of the Hobby Handle, this beautiful device right here.
Ooh.
Yeah, and also the brushes that I use are by Game Envy as well. And my little cup here that I use to rinse my brushes off. And also to Mats by Mars, who makes the paint mat that I have here.
Oh my God, they make paint mats?
They do now.
Nice.
I talked them into doing them.
Love those guys. They're really nice. Love
they're
them.
awesome, right? And for everybody out there that is like that does big wargaming and needs flat terrain for your environmentals for your war games, Mats by Mars is where you want to check that out. And of course, Army Painter, with being a big sponsor with the paints. They're going to be our exclusive paint partner for all of season 2. So we're going to get to play with all the line that the Army Painter makes. And also, of course, Ultra Pro. Ultra Pro is a maker of a lot of cool like D&D accessories and protective equipment for, card sleeves, top loaders, comic bags, all the good things you would want to keep your collectibles safe. But they also have something that is very much for miniatures. It's called a character clamp, and I don't have one right now. I'll have one soon to show off. But you can. It's basically like it's got a little like grabber on the base that holds your miniature in it, and then then you put an acrylic cube over it, so you can put it on display or keep it safe. And they're really cool, and I think anybody that's painting miniatures, if you're out and about on travel doing miniature painting, you should have one of these to carry your miniature on, keep it safe.
Absolutely.
And they're super cool. And am I missing anybody that you can think of? Well, no, not them. No, they didn't follow up on that one. That's okay. And then of course, thank you to Dwarven Forge and Tyler for you coming on and everything. We still got about 15 minutes before we're going to close up, but I wanted to make sure we absolutely said thank you. And if you are not following any of those folks, they are on all the socials, and join the Discord of Dwarven Forge, become part of that community. And you'd said something earlier that I was like really interested in trying to see if we can get our viewers to maybe change the dynamic. You said the majority of the people that purchase your product are dungeon masters. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I personally think if you are a player and you appreciate your dungeon master, getting them the gift of Dwarvenite is possibly one of the best things you could do for them and for your own adventures in their realm and worlds that they're building for you. So don't limit it to just the GMs picking that stuff up.
No, I would much rather 8 players decided to go in on a big, massive doesn't have to be massive. I just mean, like, I would much. I've heard we've had a couple people come up and even talk to us about pooling, where they were like, yeah, you know, a couple of us pooled our funds together to get this thing, and it was a lot of fun to get it. And I was like, that actively, yes, go do that. Like, if you guys trust each other and you guys want to do that for each other, do it. Like,
100%.
We're not we're not holding you down and being like, you better play with the stuff and you better be one person when you buy it. It's like,
that's right. I don't care. That's right. And what a better way to say thank you for all the time, effort, and energy that a dungeon master puts into a time of enjoyment for their players than to gift them the gift of Dwarvenite. I think that's
if you do that, you don't have to buy snacks.
Right. Because, you know, also keep your DM healthy, right? Keep them around.
Yeah.
Right, that's
what I do. I don't have to buy you chips. I don't gotta bring Pepsi.
I think my overhead cam died. Did it die? Oh, okay. I think it's about, yeah. So we're also at the point where we should probably show where we got with our miniatures today.
You're going to be very disappointed about where I got, but
I will not be disappointed because it is a miniature that is a talk show that we just happen to be painting some miniatures. All right. So I got a lot done, but this is the first time I don't think I finished a miniature on the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a big one anyway, though, dude. Like that's like you could have spent your entire time just working on the wing.
Correct. And I still got a lot of work to do on the wings and everything, but yeah, and this one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm actually going to gift, when I'm done with this, I'm going to gift it. There's a pizza joint right next door called Slice by Saddleback here in Lansing. And I went in there for lunch today, and I noticed that they've started putting little gifts that people have left them on their counter.
Oh, that's cute.
Pet rocks. Someone put a dragon stuffy on there. So I was like, I'm going to paint something. And I'm going to go over there and just put it on their counter. So I'm going to.
Is that why? Is this a pizza dragon? Because I'm like, it's either a pizza dragon or a Bodyworks dragon, and so this is into it.
Yeah, well, it's a clockwork dragon that I'm going to say has a penchant for pepperoni. All right. So let's see what you got.
Well, I based my mini.
Perfect.
But I'm also dealing with like kind of crappy lighting. So I'm like, I was like slow going, trying to make sure that everything was. But what I want to do, I guess that's what I could talk about, is that the reason I based it purple was because he's got this interior part of his cloak, his duster. And I want to keep that purple. But I also I want that undertone, and I'm probably going to do some washes in darker, like brown leathers and darks, that kind of, because so much of it is just this coat that I'm like, there's not much that you're going to need to do to this to make it look cool. And then he's in his character art, he's got that he's got this like arcane sigil or whatever that lights up on his shoulder, and so I'm going to have to try to figure that out. But the big step first is just getting to this and then seeing how I want to try to do the inside. I think I want to try to do like another wash of like a gold wash or something. Give it kind of like a cool sheen all the way through.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. That miniature is such a cool miniature too. It the way it's sculpted, the way it's posed, he just vibes attitude.
It's so it's peak vibe. I was so scared when I opened up my box because what I found was where the hand goes to the cap, it was like it's like so perfectly cut here. I was like, oh no, I broke it. I got it. And then Miles helped me put it together. He goes, oh no, man, that fist is so big. That's exactly where it's supposed to go. Everything's fine. I was like, thank God, because if I broke my like coolest guy, I would have been so mad.
No, it's a great miniature. I'm actually really glad to know that you are finding your some fandom in the Malifaux world. It's such a cool system, and the lore that Nathan over at Weird has put into this is so gritty and dark, and I'm surprised that someone hasn't just looked at it and was like, this could be the next Netflix series, right?
Well, for me too, like what I was interested in, in the Breachside broadcast that they're doing, I've been listening to some of those episodes. I'm not usually a podcast person, but I'm like, I loved like the Magnus archives, and that has a similar, not like a feel necessarily, but like in story, but in presentation, where it's like we're telling a story, and it's like, oh, I'd much rather listen to a podcast that's like a radio show. I'll do that every day.
Yeah,
Um,
those are awesome.
yeah,
Like, what's that one?
I grew up on them.
Retail?
God, I think one of the first radio shows my grandpa showed me was God, it was like an old like Doctor Who episode or something. Like it was weird. Like he got it, and it was like he was like living in Kansas. He was like somehow got the radio broadcast as well, and so like it was a thing that he listened to. Anyway, point is,
Yeah.
um, I really agree that like I saw it at Gen Con. I got distracted by it enough that I was like, all right, I got to come in and I got to talk about it. And then the person who was there helping me like understand what the game was and like what the world was, he's like, honestly, the game is fun and the game is great and there's so much about that like you can learn. He's like, but the other half of it is all of the lore. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I hate about Warhammer is like I don't really like the lore. And I'm like starting to look at it. I was like, oh, okay. Turn of the century. Weird gremlins living in the bayou.
Eh?
The dark and Cthulhu horror stuff. I'm in. Eldritch horror. I'm in. And it was everything. I was like, this is great. And what a neat thing for your third edition to what a neat opportunity to also be like our first edition to our second edition to our third edition also has evolved as a story.
Oh yeah.
And like how that lore has changed things and like the Explorer Society is new because of the third edition. It wasn't around before that, and like that kind of stuff. I think that's really just the not many other games, I guess, are doing that. Is what I'm trying to say, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, 100%. You're absolutely right, and I think that as far as like the role playing side of that particular system will fit very well for anybody out there that is playing it currently with Dwarven Forge for immersion.
That's one of the things we're already playing on our Dwarven. Like Miles and I we're only on turn one because we were like, how do you flip a card? Right. And like what it mean, Pip. And so we're playing on our terrain. Like we're putting up and it's like, oh, it's creating these shadows. And I was like, perfect. English Ivan loves the shadows, so he's gonna go directly into it and
nice
and like seeing how that changed. I really love that mechanic too. The idea of being above something in the shadow, creating a way that you can't target an enemy within that. It's like that's interesting. I never really thought about it conceptually like that. Right. I think that's pretty like
cover by shadow is pretty cool.
It also feels like simple. It feels simple enough that like you can get it from the first read. You're like, got it. Right. If it comes out of this, then you just can't do it. And it's like fantastic. I love hard rules like that where it's like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. But you told me tonight about this RPG, and I'm like, well, I guess I'll have to look into that now. I'll have to see what they're doing with that. And
fully vested.
Our terrain is perfect for this stuff. I mean, it's perfect for war game scatter for sure. Especially the way that we've been trying to revamp it within our store. We're trying to make sure that those things are accessible and easy, especially in Reforged right now on GameFound. Like you can find a bunch of scatter sets that like not only give good breaks of line of sight, but like you can get these really cool rock scatters that like start to like make it easy to like step up on stones, or you can also make it something where you're giving like a nice like even the motifs of like I've seen one where there was like a train. It was like a train on the track, and I was like, yeah, if you want something to butt up against that train and have like some sort of like rock cliff or whatever, we have escarpments that you can stack up so that you can make it look like and then make it a train heist or whatever you want to do. And very excited.
Man, that's all super cool. So everybody watching, we're down to the wire here. So everybody watching, make sure you go on GameFound, check out the new
we should be on the front page. Wildlands Reforged.
Wildlands Reforged. Check that out. Follow Dwarven Forge on all their socials. Make sure, Tyler, is there any particular socials that you want that people could follow you if you wanted them to follow the craziness that you have going on?
They know. Yeah,
you absolutely can. You can always just say,
I'm kidding. I'm Detective NO27 on pretty much every platform. Right. It's a callback to Batman first issue kind of stuff. So that's my favorite thing.
All right. And then for some of the people with some questions in the thing, Army Painter 2.0, the speed paints are all amazing. They're super fun when you have to paint a miniature in a very short amount of time. And when it comes to adding it to your toolbox, I will not say anything bad about any paint company because I have every paint company is represented in my full toolbox. But
I'd agree with that. Like
right.
there's plenty of great paints out there, and Army Speed Painter Hamster uses that all the time. Dragos,
Mhm.
like he likes it as well. Like
Yeah.
it's like you have different tools in your box for different uses, and
Yep.
you have different brushes, you have different pens, you have different whatever, and it's like I use these because of X, and so it's
Yep.
like yeah.
Exactly. So make sure you are adding Army Painter to your speed
Yes.
paints and just the regular acrylics to your toolbox, because you'll find that you're going to be using it a lot, especially in uh,
Yeah.
events like this.
Yes.
Until next time, everybody, we want to make sure you get to your friendly local game store, show them the support that they deserve and that
Yes.
they absolutely need from the community, not just for paints but all things gaming. Check them out. Become a part of the community around you, because they want you to be there. And then next week, same place, same time, we'll be back. Make sure you're not licking those brushes and don't eat the paint. I'm Rick. Have a wonderful evening.